Alberta Premier Danielle Smith was elected as a leader of the United Conservative Party less than 2 years ago. She won on the sixth and final ballot, and at the time was considered one of the most, if not the most conservative candidate in the race. However, in the months since, some conservatives, including those who supported her during the leadership race, are starting to feel a little bit disillusioned with Danielle Smith. They're saying that she is failing to deliver on promises and policies that she backed during the leadership race, like an Alberta pension plan, an Alberta police force, and lowering taxes. Today on the Alberta Roundup with Rachel Parker, I am joined by Tariq Elnaga and Marty Belanger, otherwise known as Marty up north, to discuss. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Rachel.
Pleasure to be back. Wasn't I here just a couple of days ago?
Yes, fan favorite. I had to bring you back pretty quickly.
Right.
The people were demanding it. So, Tariq, I wanted to start with you. Part of the reason I wanted to have you both on is because you've been pretty vocal and pointing out some of the inconsistencies in what Danielle said that she was going to deliver on versus now what she has done about 2 years into her premiership. And you kind of have been pointing out, listen, we need to see some action on her. So, Tariq, why don't you start by saying whether or not you supported Danielle during the leadership race and in the ways you feel she's not delivering now?
Okay, great question. So I definitely did support Premier Smith during the leadership race. And I think I did everything I can as an Albertan to support the UCP in their run. So whether that was buying a membership, donating to the party, volunteering. I remember running really a campaign against the NDP seat by seat in Calgary and pointing out the flaws of every candidate. So I was very, very energized and enthusiastic. And if anything, Rachel, if you remember, you and I met at the Big Four last year and you interviewed me as Danielle was and her government was just getting elected. Now, I feel like we've done our part to support Premier Smith and to support the UCP. It was up to her now to do her part. And I expected big, bold moves in the first 100 days. Because again, nobody makes big, bold moves in the last 100 days. I expected, aggressive tax cuts, aggressive size of government jobs, etc. None of that has happened. Exactly zero things of the things she's run on have happened. So she's likable, she's visible, but in terms of results, we haven't seen any.
Marty, why don't you go ahead and say if this is sort of your sentiments as well, or if you would take different issues with Danielle?
No, it's my sentiment as well. And like Tariq, I remember I was there on election night, but I remember very specifically, for the 3 months leading up to the election, I was doing a weekly podcast with somebody else where we were specifically focused on promoting Danielle. Like that's how much faith I had in her. Tariq says she's a conservative. I thought she was supposed to be beyond a conservative. I was hoping she'd be a libertarian because I believe in small government. Almost no government is what I believe in. And so, yeah, I agree. In industry, we talk about the 90 days, not even the 100 days. We go 90 days, you have to make an impact in those first 90 days. And after that, you either settle into a routine or you run out of time. And for me, I was being critical at first. And every time I'm critical of her, I get a lot of pushback. So, but to answer your question, yes, right now my patience is exhausted. I don't think she's moving in the right direction. She needs a course correction.
So why don't we take a little look at some of the policies that she has said she supported during the leadership race that we haven't seen any action on. One of the main things is obviously an Alberta Provincial Police force. I think this is something that a lot of Conservatives Albertans feel very strongly about. They feel that this would give us a level of separation from the federal government and from Ottawa that we don't currently have and that they would like to see. Now, Danielle Smith said she was in favor of a provincial police force during the election, but we haven't seen any dollars for that. Tariq, why don't you go first? Why do you think that is?
You bet. So I think a couple of things. I think one, she bought into the pushback from, ironically enough, the urban voters from Calgary and Edmonton that do not have the RCMP and have their own municipal policing force. She introduced what I'll call very half measures around it rather than just being bold and being aggressive. So Grand Prairie is the only municipality in the last, 18 months that have voted to transition from the RCMP into their own police force. And then again, half measures, she's like, well, we're going to backstop the policing shortage with the Alberta sheriffs. In my mind, if I was to do this, we were going to replace the RCMP with the Alberta sheriffs, and then constables can, if they wanted to, apply into the new police force and get accepted. So I'm pretty disappointed. I think in her move to the left and realizing that, again, she won Calgary by a very narrow margin, she's now starting to cater to the left rather than say, you know what, the sky isn't going to fall if we get the police force and the pension plan and so on. Do it now so that in 4 years, when you're up for re-election, you're good. You're in a good spot. And you could tell your voters, hey, this worked and crime rates have dropped, drug overdoses have dropped, drug crime has dropped. Like the things that she really, really cares about.
Which is a key, which is a key for her, right? If I can just add to that, like when you listen to Danielle, yeah, she'll talk. She knows all the priorities that she was elected on. She can rhyme them off, right? She'll say she was elected to lower taxes, defend Alberta against Ottawa, promote our industry, and things like that. By the way, she's very good with words. I mean, her 30 years in radio and media serves her well. But she speaks about the priorities. But when you compare her priorities with ours, you see sort of a little bit of a disconnect, which is she is a politician and she has her favorite projects, and her favorite projects get advanced, and the ones that she doesn't favor, she'll find an excuse not to advance them. That's
Marty,
one of my.
Let's be specific. What are those favorite projects in your mind?
Well, she wants to be, I think she's happy fighting Ottawa. She looks like she's happy. So she wants to be remembered as somebody who stood up to Ottawa for Alberta. Maybe that's because she's thinking of a longer career in Ottawa. So, the Sovereignty Act and things like that, she's very, very proud of that. She doesn't seem to want to tackle making government smaller. She doesn't want that to be her legacy. I don't know why. She's not a Ralph Klein that way. She's absolutely not interested in tackling Alberta Health and going after them and the College of Surgeons. Her legacy as far as a defender of Alberta, I think, is one of the ones that she wants to be known as. She just wants to be, she wants to, in her mind, make Alberta great. And, go ahead. Sorry.
So just to, push back or to be fair for a little bit, she did tackle Alberta Health Services in one capacity. She did break them up, divide them into different sections, sort of get rid of the centralization of power in that regard. But what I'm hearing you address specifically is that you maybe wanted to see a shakeup with more management, maybe people who are responsible, and this is me just assuming, so jump in if I'm incorrect here, people who are directly responsible for policies that we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, maybe seeing a shakeup and having them rid of their positions. Is that more of the change that you were looking for?
When I'm looking for a change, and I think the Conservatives in general are that way, we sort of had an overall plan, which is we'd like to see smaller government, we'd like to see lower taxes, we'd like to see Ottawa be, fought and pushed back into their lane, and we do our lanes, and they're all intertwined. They're not separate, and that's the thing. You can't make these things separate. So how do you lower taxes? By finding efficiencies in government somewhere. And where's a place where we think there's efficiencies? In Alberta Health. It's Alberta Health, we are targeting Alberta Health because it is a bit of a corrupt organization, but we're targeting them because it's just the biggest chunk of our budget. Like, I think it's $29 billion goes to Alberta Health. So, go after that money. Like, it's multiple birds with one stone. Cut the taxes, reform Alberta Health, find us some savings and improve it. So you don't do them separately. And whenever she starts to do them separately like that, that's where it falls apart. There's a reason you're not going after Alberta Health just because we're vindictive or COVID. You're going after Alberta Health. You need to go after Alberta Health because it's a $29 billion juggernaut.
So Tariq, when Marty talks about needing to go after Alberta Health for one reason, to save money, to cut the budget, I mean, it seems fairly obvious to me that one of the reasons that Danielle Smith has not found ways to cut costs is because the government is spending so much money. She's actually, spending more than previous government. So I don't know, Marty, I believe that she is ideologically speaking libertarian, or at least was. She's certainly not governing as one. She's spending a lot of money, and I'm seeing policies that no one asked for, like the railway system. It doesn't seem like, the best time to be implementing a policy like that when what Albertans are really asking for are for tax cuts. But what's your take on the situation? Do you think her government, their high cost of spending, are we as Albertans getting value for the things that our government's spending money on right now?
Unequivocally, no. I mean, we used to have sort of a $40 billion a year budget, and I think we're approaching $70 billion. I mean, for me, the most current budget was a shocker when it came out. And I actually did a detailed analysis. I compared the growth of our budget with the growth of our population, and our budget is outpacing growth by a factor of 4 to 1. So it's crazy. And then when you look at spending per capita, in some categories we're the highest. Like, I think we're almost the highest in spending per capita on healthcare, and we're not getting value compared to other places. So that's one answer. And to your, you're right. She's not acting like a libertarian. She is a libertarian. I mean, at first she has a tattoo. She literally has a tattoo on her arm, like from a libertarian organization that she's attended, and she liked it so much she got it tattooed on her arm. But just this week she mentioned something like that a provincial auto insurance is not out of the question. I'm like, wow, like that's out of the question if you're a libertarian. In fact, it's almost out of the question if you're a conservative. Like, more state organizations, that's contrary. That's completely contrary to what we've asked her or elected her to do.
Tariq, I'll just go ahead and let you answer the same question there. Where do you think things have gone wrong with the budget?
I think her budget is $20 billion more than Rachel Notley's biggest budget. For an indication. And I don't know how you justify that. And I don't know how you justify even the front bench, like the Minister of Finance going on TV and saying, Nate Horner, and saying, here's our budget. Oh, and by the way, we're deferring taxes because we still have to spend, and we want to grow the Heritage Fund and what have you. I think she could have made some bold moves in the first 100 days to chop out ministries that aren't, I will call, essential for today. So for example, if you're in a crunch and you have $77 billion of debt, which the province does, and you need to lower taxes, I get healthcare spending. Obviously, our inefficiencies in healthcare are gigantic. But then you look at ministries like, for example, sport, recreation, tourism. Those can instantly, you can go. Like, we will still function as society if these ministries go. And think about the millions and millions of dollars of staffing, real estate, policy, etc., that you could save on ministries like those to start with. And she hasn't done that. She hasn't brought small government solutions of opening up the utilities market or the aviation market or the telecoms market or so on. So open up those. So make it cheaper for us as consumers to get into. So I'd like to see small government solutions, privatizing parts of the government where they're not essential services, but the private sector does it better, cheaper, faster. And then ultimately, the thing that kind of shocks me the most, Rachel, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this a little bit later, is she's put her foot down and said, I want to double Alberta's population. And just the unbridled immigration that we're seeing here. And I understand that immigration is a federal policy item from a total aggregate number, but there's certain tools within Premier Smith's hands that she could do to at least slow it down. But no, she's encouraging it. I mean, 200,000 people in the last 12 months.
Did you hear why she's taken the strategy? Like,
Yes.
by the way, coincidentally, I listened to her yesterday. So she was in Calgary here yesterday. There was what do you call it? Not an open house, but a town hall at one of the local constituency associations, and she came out to speak. So, and she reiterated this. She wants to grow Alberta to 10 million people as a way to increase our clout within Confederation. And it's like, well, that's a flawed theory anyways, because there's a giant flaw in Confederation, which already dictates who gets however many seats. There's a formula. So increasing our population will barely have an impact on our clout. And so that's a troubling, that one really troubled me.
If I may, Marty, I think it's flawed for more than one reason. I think it's also flawed because I don't know that the people that you're bringing here are going to be on board with your conservative agenda. Typically speaking, the people who live in Alberta are very unique. I've lived in Ontario. I've spent much time elsewhere in the country. Alberta is a very unique and special place, and I don't know if that policy does enough to address and to want to conserve the uniqueness and the specialness of Alberta. I think that that's being missed. And I remember a few months ago, the Premier said, we want to have 1 million people in Red Deer. 1 million people in Red Deer. The people who live in Red Deer don't want 1 million people there. The people who live in Red Deer like that it's a smaller city. They like that they can get into Edmonton quickly. They like that they can get into Calgary quickly without dealing with all the busyness and, frankly, the expense of those cities. They don't want...
Yeah. I find I'm from an Alberta when there was 1.9 million people here. At 4.5, I find this place overwhelming, like overcrowded. So, if it gets to 10 million, I'll be suffocating. So, yeah, no, I agree. That's a great point. She addressed it by saying that. Actually, somebody brought up a good point of perhaps addressing that, which is, make the temporary foreign worker as a stepping stone. So accept workers here under that program, and then if you show yourself as being a valuable worker, then you can apply for permanent status afterwards, which was a great idea. And but it's going to be difficult for her anyways, because immigration is kind of like a weird shared responsibility between yeah.
The other thing as well is we're not a system or a country that builds quickly. So roads, schools, hospitals, etc. So the funny part is we're already behind capacity. Like if we stopped immigration as a temporary hold for, let's say, 3 to 5 years, we'd barely still catch up. Yet it's absolutely unbridled. Like if you look at the cost of housing, Alberta used to be affordable. Like that was one of, and it wasn't affordable by choice. It was affordable due to organic growth and small governments, low taxes, etc., and strong economies. So it wasn't just by happenstance that we're affordable. We're losing that now. The Alberta advantage, I think, is either gone or just about to be gone.
Yeah, Tariq, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah. It depends on where you live. It still depends on where you live. There are still pockets in Alberta. There's some smaller towns, especially if you go further north where not as many people want to live because of the weather. You can still get a lower cost of living. But, one of the reasons that I myself moved to Alberta was partly for a good job opportunity, but also because as a young person, I was priced out of Ontario. And most recently living in Calgary, my rent is more than I would have paid if I was living in Niagara. Like my husband and I moved now, but for a 2-bedroom townhouse, very narrow, I think it wasn't even about 9 feet wide. It was almost $3,000 a month. Like,
Well, the numbers don't lie. I mean, we're letting in about 250,000 people came to Alberta last year, and our record year for building housing units is 48,000 housing units, and that was in the 1990s. We've done it three or four times in the last 50 years. We've had years where we suddenly managed to build 40, 50,000 housing unit. And if you think of a housing unit as holding 3 or 4 people, perhaps, and I don't even think it's that high, then that only accommodates 160,000 people. So when we let in 250, we're just falling behind.
And the craftsmanships of these homes that are being swept up are often coming into question as well. Like these new builds are not quality. They're not made to last, and they're not providing a good quality of life either. Marty, you mentioned something that I think we need to mention, which is the fact that immigration is federal. That being said, there are things provinces can do to discourage people from moving here. I know that you were talking about this a little bit on X. Why don't you share some of your ideas? What are things you think the premier could be doing if she had a stance that we need to slow immigration down?
Well, like I said, you would have to show that you have a place to live or a place to work. Like you could put, I think she could put a province could put rules like that. I mean, language laws are also a rule, right? Quebec does it all the time. You don't speak French within a certain, you can't work in Quebec. They won't let you in. I don't know how they do it technically, but Quebec does things like that. So there are things to discourage people from coming here, or things we can do to pick and choose, but it would be very difficult. The way Confederation works, once somebody's in Canada, they're almost free to move anywhere they want. And what happens right now, we're letting in millions of people, and they're going to Ontario, they're going to Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Calgary. It's just, no, I think that's the reality. I mean, she's not, by the way, she's not willing to change other things that I think are easier to change. So she's not going to tackle Ottawa in terms of immigration. She'll fall back to, hey, well, the rules are the rules. And she wants more people anyway. This is not one of her pet projects. She wants more people in Alberta. So she's absolutely not going to interfere, I don't think.
Sure. Just before we maybe change direction, Tara, I was just going to say, like, there might not be a lot that she could do to dissuade people from moving here, but I think some obvious things is maybe to not encourage them to come here. Like we have the Alberta is Calling campaign, and I get that those are targeted tax credits, but if you talk to someone in Ontario, they're like, I hear you guys people want people to move there, and I hear it's a cheaper cost of living. I'm thinking about moving there, and I'm like, well, it's not what you think it is.
Well, ironically, there's programs in place to encourage long-term Albertans to stay here. So, like, this is getting ridiculous because new people are coming, and people who've been here a long time are leaving.
There are tools within her control. Like I would say, one to start with, get on TV tomorrow and say Alberta's not calling anymore. We're full. Not coming. Like to start with, right? Like just from a marketing standpoint. And then the other tools that are within her control because they're provincial is healthcare and education. You say, you know what? If you move here for the first 24 months, starting September 1st, it's a pay into system. So there's a holding period of 24 months until you get free healthcare and free education. That's well within her control, easily, right? That will stop 70% of people right away because they're like, oh, I have to move to Alberta, but I have to pay for healthcare and education for 2 years. But yeah, it's fair. You need to build into the system until you could start to take out of it. So there's certain tools within her realm that she can take, if not to control the federal immigration numbers, to at least control the movement of internal immigration within the country.
Another thing that I want to ask you guys about is this idea of an Alberta pension plan. Now, this is something that the Premier has said that she supports even well in, within the last few months. It's something that would likely be difficult to get passed through. Marty, did this come up in your town hall at all in Calgary this week?
It's top 3 on the list all the time of things she gets asked on. I mean, the data is overwhelmingly positive for Alberta. Like the data is just that positive. Like we should have an Alberta pension plan. We'll do better than the Canada pension plan. It'll be, everything about it is better. So if anybody who says they're interested in researching things before they make decisions, you wouldn't have to research this one very long. And she acknowledged that. She kind of said that 1/3 are in favor, 1/3 are against it, and the other third are still wanting more data. So her excuse or go-to right now is that she's still studying it, and so we'll see. But yeah, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's a benefit to Alberta to have her own pension.
Yeah, I think that's something that conservatives largely agree on. Of course, when she says we're still setting it, that's really a way for governments to continue kicking the ball down the line and to not be accountable to people. Oh, we're still looking into it. Tariq, do you think this is something that we are going to see the Premier act on within her tenure?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the window for that has now closed. If she was going to pull the trigger on this was a first 90, 100 days thing, because it is quite a contentious issue with the left-leaning voter in Calgary and Edmonton, but they're not going to vote for you anyways. So start acting for the interests of Alberta. The other thing as well, Rachel, that really disappointed me was Pierre Poilievre came publicly against, openly in the media against the Alberta Provincial Pension Plan, rather. And she said nothing back. And I think she acquiesced because, again, here's a leader that wears our colors, but it doesn't show very well for him in the GTA. And again, he's focused on winning the GTA. But I would have expected her to put her foot down and say, you know what, we respect your opinion, but we're looking after provincial autonomy first.
Yeah. And very pragmatically, I think the Alberta pension was poorly rolled out when it came out. I mean, they didn't think it out. They neglected the fact that it had been studied. There were numbers that were contradictory. I mean, there were numbers in there being thrown around that even for I went, ooh, that sounds a little bit. So they kind of blew an opportunity. And when that happens, you can't just sort of pivot and reissue it. I think this one's unfortunately might have to sit on the shelf for a while and be tried again, like in a second mandate. But she did say yesterday that if the information that we requested from the chief actuary of Canada, whoever that guy is or gal, that she will do a campaign to promote it again and put it to a referendum. That's what she said. Whether it's in this term or the next, to be seen.
Yeah, there's certainly still organizers working on it and trying to grow support for an Alberta pension plan. But I do agree with you that this is something that the longer they wait, the more difficult it gets to roll out, because this is not the type of thing that you really want to be rolling out ahead of a general election. And, as the time keeps ticking on, we're getting closer and closer to that next election date against now Naheed Nenshi's NDP.
Sure, but time is also on our side in the sense that I look at what's happening at the Bank of Canada and the Canada Pension Plan, and they're both being mismanaged right now and having hard times. So, maybe 3 years from now, when the Canada Pension Plan has to disclose that they lost 20%, then we go, see, should have done it earlier. So time could be beneficial in that sense.
Yeah. I know we were talking a little bit about the financial aspects of things, but just because we, are having this conversation, I think it would be remiss to not mention some of the things that I hear most complaints about is the fact that we still have the provincial fuel tax, and the fact that there was a promise to cut income taxes, and that promise is now being kicked down the line as well. Initially, it was supposed to come into place 2024, those cuts, which would have savings for a couple $100s for a family. Then it was moved to 2025. Now talk of 2026. Marty, just because you were at the town hall, are these things that the premier is still being asked about, or have people kind of, forgotten about these promises?
No. They asked about that. She almost got booed when she, she's really trying to. She's focused on the fact that she's paying down debt. So not a big budget for her. She's paying down debt and she's refunding the Heritage Fund, and so that's her excuse for not giving a tax break, and she got pushed back on that, almost booed. It's a question on the tip of everybody's,
Rachel.
Yeah.
I can't believe that, between Marty and I, we are either expressing dissatisfaction or organizing or going out to perhaps tell our libertarian conservative premier to let us keep a little bit more of our own money. I can't believe it. Like, I can't, and 2 years in now, almost, like in October, she'll be 2 years in as the premier of Alberta. And between the high spend and now certain crises like the water crisis in Calgary, and then the Jasper fires and so on, I think that's going to blow whatever room in the budget she's seen. I'm a little bit now pessimistic in the sense that we'll ever see a tax cut from the premier this year. And more so, if we do see it, it's going to be very symbolic rather than an aggressive, truly libertarian tax cut. The government should be in the business of nothing. That's the way I look at it. And for her to continue to grow spend, to continue to grow, and I don't think she'll catch up even just on immigration. Like, immigration is going to eat up whatever is left of her budget in terms of healthcare and education and infrastructure supports. So it's I don't see that tax cut coming, and if it does come, Rachel, I don't see it being one that's significant. It's like, here's a few scraps to keep you guys quiet, rather than truly a Klein-esque, aggressive reduction in the size of government debt and taxes.
When we talk about dissatisfaction growing with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, the one thing that I have to say is I hear most often about people in Alberta who are struggling to meet payments. And I think that moving forward with those income tax cuts, offering some relief at the pump, and then maybe even a one-time payment to people. I mean, I'm not against that because ultimately it's our money in the first place. I think that would go a long way with some of the support that she's losing. I think that could honestly be enough to turn things around for people just because they are really feeling it in the wallet. Tariq, what's your take on that?
Absolutely. I'd just like Premier Smith to deliver what she ran on. Like, we're not asking for the moon here. She ran on reducing taxes, on reducing the size of government, on the pension plan, on the police force, etc. We've held our end of the bargain. We've empowered her with our votes. And I'd like for her to hold her end of the bargain up. I'd like to see her start to deliver on this and deliver aggressively, not talk about it, because she's very good at talking about it. But I want to see a plan in the next 90 days until the AGM. And a very concrete plan, no dilly-dallying, no wishy-washy. I want an actual plan on the things she's going to deliver on. If she doesn't, I've lost confidence, truly, Rachel, in the premier.
The tax one is confusing. I mean, she had one handed to her on a silver platter in April. Like, she had, previous government had lowered the fuel tax, and she brought it back up. It's like, why would you do that? Like, if instead of bringing it back up, all she had to say is, hey, you know what? We're leaving it off permanently. It's 7 cents a liter, whatever the heck it is. Everybody would have gone, perfect, done. And, we're not asking for complex tax reform, like going back. I'd love to go back to a flat tax like we used to have under Klein, but drop the top rate or drop the middle rate from whatever, 13% to 12.5%, something, anything. She's funny that way. She digs her heels. I'm sure you've interviewed her. I know you've interviewed her personally. I mean, she digs her heel. Let me just tell you the other one she got sort of booed on yesterday, apart from taxes, is the whole evening started out. The first line of questions towards her is, why are you not taking the mRNA vaccine off the approved list of vaccines, despite overwhelming evidence that it's harmful. And boy, she dug her heels in there, and she was getting booed. And the interviewer on stage literally said to her, "Is like, Danielle, I'm trying to help you here. Look at this crowd. Like, they're mad." And she wouldn't have any of it. So she's got an interesting personality. If it's her pet project, full speed ahead. But you're the leader of the province. It can't be all about your pet projects.
Yeah, the vax. Go ahead, Terry. Go ahead. You've been
I was
trying to
just going
talk
to
for a
say
minute.
on the fuel tax, this was a 100% own goal on Danielle Smith's part. She reintroduces it on the same day, April 1st, that the federal carbon tax goes up. I'm like, could you have had any worse optics as a libertarian to introduce it on the same day that the carbon tax goes up? So sorry, but I just wanted to add that. But
No, and I think even also like when we look at the NDP government in Manitoba, they've even reduced their fuel tax. So it's shocking that we still have it in Alberta. And it's the fact that she brought it back as well with the mRNA vaccines. I mean, the crazy part about that is it's something that even the United Conservative Party is pushing the government to change. And I guess Marty, I'm just curious what she actually said yesterday, because when I interviewed her a couple months ago, she actually said that there was a misunderstanding and that the COVID-19 vaccine was only being recommended for babies beginning at 6 months when they had already a pre-existing illness, which is not the case. It is being recommended for all children, as I'm sure you know. So I'm just wondering what her response to that was yet on Wednesday.
She did some weird mental gymnastics on that one. Basically the question was that group yesterday, that constituency association, is the one that had the injection of truth 2 months ago. And so that group has talked to a lot of doctors. And so that group, so they the way they phrased the question is, there is a lot of evidence that the vaccine is harmful to kids. And why won't you remove it? And her answer to that was, I want to keep giving parents choices. So, okay, that's valid, but you're going to allow parents to still choose something that's dangerous. That's interesting. If a car's, anyways, and then she justified it by saying, yeah, besides, very few people get the vaccine. So that's how she justified it. She said among children, only about 6% of parents get their kids injected. But then the interviewer caught her in a loop, because then he started talking about ivermectin and how come we can't get ivermectin. And she had to do these mental gymnastics to justify not being able to get ivermectin. And he said, well, shouldn't we have a choice? So she got caught really bad on that one, really, really bad on that one. And it's a weird one, because the really weird thing about this is Alberta used to collect really good information when it comes to COVID and cross-referencing it to vaccines and stuff like that. And other jurisdictions like Florida literally used our information, our data, to help make the decision to ban the mRNA vaccine. So other jurisdictions are using our data, but when we interpret our own data, we come to a different conclusion. It was fascinating on that point. I don't know if she's compromised in that sense, or if it's stubborn. That one, actually, I have a theory on that one. I think Big Pharma is very, 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 very more powerful than we give it credit for, I think.
Okay, I just wanted to quickly clarify, because I said, so the town hall with Danielle was on Tuesday. We're recording the show on Wednesday, and it's going live on Saturday. So for my audience, you're trying to do mental gymnastics, figuring out what days we're talking about. You have the timeline there. So just remember that as we flip back and forth between dates. Okay, I just want to talk to you guys about one other thing, maybe two more topics before we talk about the AGM that's coming up this fall, because that is a big part of why this conversation matters. But first and foremost, something that I've personally been surprised by is Danielle's seeming shift in her supports for the Coots boys. Specifically, if we're talking about the Coots three, so we've got Marco Van Huygenbos, Alex Van Herk, George Vanson. I've interviewed most of them a couple of times now. They are waiting for their sentencing. I believe that it was supposed to be in July. I believe it's been pushed back, but they're ultimately facing jail time. I believe it's up to 5 years for mischief, over 5,000 for their involvement with the Coots border blockade. And I asked Danielle this question, and she basically just said, like, the law is the law. Didn't seem to have much information on it. I know that she has been found guilty for putting pressure on her justice minister and her attorney general to regarding the prosecution of this case. But would it have been so bad for her to just simply voice a word of support or encouragement to these men? Because to me, that isn't the same as maybe going and speaking with your justice minister, seeing if there's something you can do about the actual case itself. Tariq, let's start with you. What's your take?
I agree. Like, one, I think she it's not just a voice of support. And fine, she's saying I can't get involved in the legal process that's supposed to be independent from the executive process. That's fine. But here's how we prevent this from happening again. or is here's how we make sure that we don't have a court system that is used as a political tool of the federal government. I would have liked her to start saying, okay, I can't do something here, but this is what I could do to prevent it from ever happening again. She hasn't even done that. And she hasn't even said, okay, this is how we're going to reform the judicial or legislative process so that this doesn't happen again. So, I mean, I know Marco personally and I've talked to him quite a few times. It's unfortunate that this has happened. And it's unfortunate in the first place that Albertans got to the point where we had to protest and the blockade and so on to regain our rights. Like, it wasn't to get additional rights. It was just to regain our rights and our freedoms at the time. But to answer your question, I think she could have done a little bit more, or at least shown stronger colors rather than ride the fence.
And I think this just goes back to something like conservatives in Alberta, like largely her base or particularly supported these men, right? So it's so out of touch with her base. Marty, what's your take?
Yeah, she describes herself as a constitutional person. Like she likes to talk about the Canadian Constitution and law, and so I think that does fog her opinions on a few things, but fundamentally, I disagree when she says she can't interfere. We're not asking her to interfere. We're asking her to do her role as a premier, which is inquire and inform yourself and ask questions. We're not asking her to call the judge and say, hey, whatever, shorten the sentence. We're asking you to call the judge and say, why is it taking so long? Or if not the judge, call the attorney general and have the attorney general have discussions with the judges and things like that. So, and again, I don't know why she'll even yesterday she was asked this question again, and she referred back to, she said, I can't do this. It's in the Constitution. She got laughed at when she said that, because the audience literally said, wow, you're the first person suddenly who's going to follow the Constitution and let others abuse the Constitution. We're asking. So yeah, I don't buy this one. I don't buy this one from Danielle. Danielle, as an elected premier of a province, is the primary lawmaker. So in order to make laws, you should be able, once you've made laws, you're allowed to go visit with the lawyers and the judges and the courts to see how your laws are working, get feedback in case you need to adjust the laws. I maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but she should have, and specifically in the case of Coots and whatnot, as far as I'm concerned, that's a gross miscarriage of justice. I mean, for something to take this long, somebody should have stepped in.
Okay, so let's now talk about this in the context of why this conversation matters so much right now, because we're looking at the United Conservative Party annual general meeting is coming up. It'll be held in Red Deer the first weekend of November, and there will be a vote on whether to have a review of Danielle's leadership at that convention. I know a couple weeks ago I did a story on this, and I heard from sources that the Premier's office was feeling very confident that they were hoping to get more than 80% support from the party membership. I have a feeling that in the last few weeks, things have shifted. I'm hearing a lot more resentment among Conservatives, and I know that people are quietly starting to organize to see about maybe having a recall of Danielle, or at least to significantly, dampen her numbers so that perhaps she takes her base a little more seriously. Are you guys thinking that this is a likelihood that she could actually be in a tough battle to hold on to her leadership and ultimately the premiership in November?
Let me seek one clarification, and I think maybe Tariq knows this, but I don't think she has a choice. It's not like there's a first vote where we say, should we have a leadership review, and then we have a leadership review. I think the UCP Constitution says there's a leadership review every 3 out of every 4 AGMs.
Yes,
you don't have one.
Sorry, they'll be asking the question as to whether
there's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's a very simple question on the ballot. Everybody in attendance: is she doing a good job? Yes or no. That's it. And the rules are pretty straightforward. It's a classic majority, 50% of the votes plus one person. So I don't think it's a slam dunk for her. Not at this point.
Well, and I would also add that it's not even a 50% plus one, because no leader will stay as leader of the party if they don't have support from 70 to 80% of the membership. So she actually needs to get support from much higher than 50%. Otherwise, at that point, the calls will be too loud for her to step down and she won't have a choice. But Tariq, do you see this as something that is going to be an issue for her?
It's all going to depend on her really in the next 90 days. It's in her court to see, is she going to deliver or is she not. I know where I'm going to stand as one individual. I've got four things that she ran on: low taxes, small government, pension, police force, among others. And I think that the fifth one that I'd like to see her actually address head on is immigration. I know where I stand on November 1 in the evening. If she doesn't have a plan for all five of them, I'm not voting in confidence for Premier Smith. If she does have a plan, and again, it's not like she has to execute on all five. She has to just have a plan on how to execute on all five, but concrete plans with timelines and dates and numbers and so on. If she doesn't have that, I'm not going for it. Now, I do know that there are groups that are organizing for her. Rachel, ultimately, politics, this is the unfortunate part, is sometimes it's about performance, sometimes it's exclusively about organization. So it's who's going to show up at the AGM, and who's a better organizer, who's going to bring the people in that are truly going to say, this is what we stand for, this is the base, engage the membership and make sure they show up. I mean, the rules are, you've got to buy a ticket that's $170, you've got to be a member by October 11th, that's for $10, and you've got to be present in Red Deer on November 2nd to make the vote. So if these people are dissatisfied or satisfied with Danielle, either side, but they're not there, or they don't have a ticket, or they don't have a membership, they're not expressing it. So what I'll say is, get involved. If you support Premier Smith, get involved. If you don't support her, get involved. But you have to show up in Red Deer on November 2nd, because otherwise, the old forever hold your peace thing. And as if she survives this one, I don't think even non-Danielle supporters are going to be making big moves in future AGMs, because it gets closer and closer to a general election date. So it's now or never in my mind.
And yeah, I mean, I want her to succeed. Like when I look at the people that we've had in the last 20 years, and when I look at the pool of talent around us, she's got the right talent. I want her to succeed. I think we have a good chance with her, and I agree. It's for me, it's the next 2-3 months, and it's hers to lose. But in the next 2-3 months, and in the next 2-3 months, if she doesn't start delivering, she's going to have to deliver a pretty compelling speech to get me to support her in the next, at the AGM. Now, and that said, I just said the talent pool is thin. That weighs on my mind. I mean, it could be chaos to just look at what happened in the US right now, so, I agree. It's good to hold politicians accountable, but I also have to be pragmatic about the shit we're dealing with in the world we live in. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think those are the tensions that most people will be going into the AGM with. I think there's still a ton of support for Danielle among the United Conservative Party, but I have been hearing increased numbers of complaints. So I think, what you said, Tariq, about seeing a plan, but also I think people are going to be looking for specific actions over the next couple of weeks. And like I said, I feel like there's some super obvious things she could do right off the hop to sort of do a better job of solidifying that support in November. And I just don't understand why some of those simple things are not being done, like lowering taxes or one-time payments. I know that the Premier is now working on a Bill of Rights. I know that was largely done to sort of reassure some supporters who may be adrift. This is something that a lot of people in her very conservative base wanted. Do you think that will do a good job of bringing back some supporters who otherwise would have maybe been a bit disillusioned with the Danielle Premier?
I think, again, any move she does that delivers for the benefit of Alberta and the Conservative movement are good for her. Ultimately that's good. So now, is it enough? It'll all depend. In 90 days, a lot can happen, and I think it's up to her to win it or lose it. Now, in terms of the talent pool and who comes next, and they're like, well, I personally don't buy into the fear of, if we don't get Danielle, we'll get Nancy. That's shooting for the lowest common denominator. That's shooting for the lowest bar. I want excellence. I want a Ralph Klein. I want absolute excellence. And people are like, well, if not Premier Smith, then who? To me, it doesn't matter who. It matters what they do. I don't care who that individual is. Liking or disliking the head of government is not what I'm in the business of. I want them to deliver results. And maybe I dislike them, but they get the right results. That's okay too. But at this point, Premier Smith does have support. She is well liked. But she has delivered, in my mind, limited results at best. That's not good enough for me. Again, this is a performance review, not a leadership review. And in terms of a performance review, I don't know if I give her a C- right now. No.
And this will be a good test. Like a really good leader takes criticism and will, adjust a course and make the necessary adjustments. Having to change course on something is not it doesn't mean you're admitting failure. It does technically mean you made a mistake and you're changing, but mistakes are fine. I mean, we're human. And so changing a few things in the next 3 months, that's not a failure. It's an adjustment. And if she's unable to make adjustments, then she's not the right leader. By the way, just so I lived under Ralph Klein. I mean, Ralph Klein was my premier. I played poker against Ralph Klein at the Yellowhead Casino in Edmonton. We will never see another Ralph Klein. Ralph was unique. God bless him. He was unique. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I think we'll leave it there for today. I really appreciate your insight. I hope that our listeners enjoy the show, and I think we'll have to sit down and do it again a little closer to the AGM to see where we've landed just ahead of November. Thank you so much for tuning in today.
Well, you can have us as correspondents for the AGM. That gets us in for free instead of no.
You can come do the camera work for me. That's fine.
Sure.
There you go.
All right, there you go. Awesome.
All right, everyone. Have a great weekend. I'll see you guys next week, and God bless.